Hello, and thank you for joining us today to talk about the development of a cooperative family app for the PBS Kids TV show Hero Elementary. My name is Dennis Ramirez. I'm the digital program manager at Twin Cities Public Television, and today I'm joined by Momo Hayakawa and Charlie Mackin. Today we'll be talking about the development of Operation Investigation, a family science app where 2 to 5 players work together to classify animals. In this talk, we'll focus on the impact code development had on the creation of this app. First, a little background about Hero Elementary. Hero Elementary is an educational kids TV show airing on PBS about a group of superheroes in training who use their superpowers of science to learn about the world around them. Hero Elementary was made possible by a grant from the Ready to Learn program. The goals of the Hero Elementary project is to improve the school readiness and academic achievement of children in grades K through 2 in science and literacy. The target population for our program was Latino communities, English language learners, children with disabilities, and children from low income households. In order to meet the goals of our project and to best serve our target communities, we decided to use code development during the development of our Family Science app. In this presentation, we will be defining code development as involving a third party, often the target audience, in the development of a product through direct feedback and focus groups. There's overwhelming evidence that family engagement in children's education has long lasting impacts, from preschool through high school. Students whose families were engaged in their education have been shown to have better social skills and have higher academic achievement, and have fewer reports of negative classroom behavior. For these and several other reasons, we decided to make a science app that involved the whole family. But why use co-design? Co-design puts the community you're designing for in the center of the conversation. By having them involved in the process, you make sure to consider the wants and the needs of the communities that you're designing for. Co-design encourages ownership of the property within the community. We use code development throughout our development process, and we will each talk a little bit about how that looked. I'll talk a little bit about how we used code design during pre production. Momo will talk about code design during active development. And finally, Charlie will talk about some design decisions we made to allow for the input from families even after the app was released. To learn more about how parents played games with their children, we conducted a variety of playtest sessions where we watched parents co play a game with their child to see the interactions that occurred naturally and what playstyles were the most successful in creating our ideal player experience. Examples of some of the design considerations that we got from these user tests was the ability to allow for more than just a parent and a child playing together. We also had to consider the device that would be used to play this game. Operation Investigation, we had to design the game in such a way that other players were still engaged even when it wasn't their turn and they weren't looking directly at the screen. This was done through turn taking, open ended questions, and audio cues. After user testing, we involved people from our target communities in a game jam where we worked together to design the family game. During the game jam, we split up into small groups to generate ideas and play tested one another's ideas to identify promising prototypes. After the game jam, we took the best 3 ideas and created low fidelity digital prototypes, which we re evaluated with our target community. We selected the most promising prototype and expanded on it, adding elements from the TV show and creating a wireframe. These wireframes would serve as the design document for the rest of development and would mark the end of our pre production. Next, Momo will talk about how we continue to use code development during active production.
Hi, I'm Momo Hayakawa, and I oversee the research involved with Hero Elementary. My colleague Dennis described pre production collaborations with families, and now I'll share with you how we incorporate voices from families during active development. In partnership with WestEd, our independent research partner, we conducted multiple rounds of alpha and beta testing of Operation Investigation to ensure that the user experience was intuitive and to improve areas that may be confusing to families. So today I'm going to share with you the insights we obtained through formative testing and why that was so important. Our goals for conducting formative testing are as follows. First, to identify to what extent adults and children can successfully play the game. Second, to understand who controls the pace of the game and how the control shifts over the course of gameplay. Third, to identify areas of struggles, challenges, and confusions. And fourth, to understand the content and type of discussions that occur during gameplay. What's important to note here is that the families we recruit for participation in all rounds of formative testing reflect the families from our target audience that Operation Investigation is intended for. As part of the Hero Elementary program, our target audience includes Latinx families, families from underserved communities, English language learners, and children with disabilities. In our first round of alpha testing, we had 9 families participate. They include various configurations of families. For example, 1 parent, 1 child, 1 parent, 3 children, 2 parents, 3 kids, etc. And we wanted to see if there were variations in gameplay and the dynamics depending on the number of players. Observers followed the following protocol across 3 rounds. First, families played the game without any facilitation. Second, families played with the facilitators assisting them. And then third, families played with facilitator encouragement of discussion. If the facilitator noticed a lack of discussion during gameplay, they modeled asking questions. So here are some interesting findings from the alpha study. Older siblings would take control of the device physically, but because they also were the most technologically savvy compared to their younger sibling or even their adult caregiver. Some caregivers were not used to playing games on a mobile device and would just hand it over to their kids to take control. So we learned from this that perhaps we need to slow down the pace and provide an opportunity for the adults to pose questions and for some discussion to occur among all the players as opposed to the older sibling simply clicking through. In the beta testing, we provided an opportunity to simulate at-home use of the app. We had 9 families participate, split them into 2 groups. One group did a single play session, and the second group did a multi-play session where they came in, learned about the game, took it home, played it as a family, and then came back to debrief. Asking families to take the game home and naturalistically play in their home environment allowed us to understand realistic gameplay trends that we cannot capture in a single play session. Adults and older siblings initially facilitated or controlled the gameplay. However, once younger children understood the rules of the game, discussions were around science content rather than how to play the game. Our experiences with formative testing illustrate the importance of recruiting and conducting these formative studies with families from diverse backgrounds, including varying age ranges, various family compositions, etc. And when we did this for our alpha and beta testing, we learned a lot about different use cases and how family dynamics and comfort with technology had a large impact on how families played the game. It's also very important, when possible, to look at the naturalistic use of the app. The take-home group provided insight into what gameplay would look like once they were familiar with how to play the game. They also started to have more dialogue during gameplay because they weren't focused on figuring out how to play the game. Many of these insights would not have been possible without the help of our families from different communities generously contributing their time and sharing their thoughts with us.
I'm Charlie Mackin, and I'm going to talk about the role of user-generated content in Operation Investigation. After spending so much time on co-development and getting user feedback in pre-production and production, we started to ask ourselves, how do we allow for user input even after the game has already launched? This is when we added the user-generated content section of the game. In the user-generated make section of the game, players are asked to take a picture of an animal, name the animal, and then classify it using the 6 classification measures used in the main game. Then, they may find their inputted animal in a play session later on. It might even end up being the perfect sidekick for Furbler. The make section requires the player to draw on their existing knowledge of the animal they're inputting, while prompting the players to fill in gaps of knowledge with outside sources. For example, players are asked to consult books or other sources if they don't know what kind of food an animal eats. Allowing players to add the animal traits themselves makes them an active participant in their learning, rather than having the information presented to them. They have to consider their answers and often ask questions to complete the task. For many of the traits, like speed and weight, the answers are relative, causing the player to stop, reflect, and compare previous answers given. We wanted these measures to be flexible enough to accommodate for a comparison, and broad enough that a child in our age range would have no trouble describing animals using that vocabulary. For example, a player can think that their dog is heavy, but they know that an elephant is labeled heavy, and their dog isn't as heavy as an elephant, so maybe they'll label it medium. Players would often use the Make feature to add their pet, imaginary animals, and even their younger siblings to the game. While none of these additions would usually be added to this kind of list, players were still using the same classification skills and often had thought-out reasoning when asked why each trait was added. Adding an animal that didn't quite fit was causing them to adjust their mental model of what each trait was and how it could present in the world around them. This also had the added benefit of increasing our average playtime. Players would create a new animal and be so excited at the possibility of seeing it in the game that they'd go back to the play section after using the Make section. Parents often preferred to act as a trusted expert, answering questions as their child input the traits. This often prompted an interesting discussion between the two, and occasionally even the parent didn't know the answer. They then had the opportunity to look up the answer and find out together. For example, one child asked their parent if a bee had fur, feathers, or scales. The parent could tell their child that they knew a bee was fuzzy, but they weren't sure if that fuzz was considered hair. The two of them got to discover together that that fuzz is hair, which was not only a great learning moment, but a really great family moment as well. Overall, we found that adding the user input section made it possible for families to customize the game to be more relevant to their own lives and allowed us to better serve our target audience. For more information, visit heroelementary.org or feel free to reach out to any of us. Thank you.